the Inca road system that crossed mountains. Modern highways still a void. Thin air burns the lungs. Every breath feels like it has to be earned. High in the Andes, where cliffs drop thousands of feet and clouds drift below the peaks, something appears that doesn't make sense. A road, not a rough trail, not a temporary path carved by desperate travelers. A deliberate, engineered route stretching across terrain that modern highway planners still hesitate to touch. This wasn't supposed to exist, and yet, it does. Stretching over 25,000 miles, the Inca road system connected an empire that ran from modern-day Colombia all the way down to Chile. That alone sounds impressive, until the details start piling up. No iron tools, no wheeled vehicles, no written language, no large animals to haul materials. Just human ingenuity, observation, and an understanding of nature that feels almost impossible today. The result wasn't just a road network. It was something far more complex. Something alive. This system wasn't built across easy terrain. It cut directly through one of the harshest mountain ranges on Earth. The Andes aren't just tall mountains. They're chaotic. Jagged cliffs, unstable slopes, deep ravines, and elevations high enough to make even trained climbers struggle. Modern engineers often reroute roads to avoid these extremes. The Inca engineers didn't avoid them. They went straight through. Stone pathways cling to mountainsides as if they've grown there. Steps rise and fall with the terrain, carved with precision that still surprises experts today. Tunnels cut through solid rock. And then there are the bridges. Suspension bridges, woven entirely from grass fibers, stretch across massive chasms. These weren't symbolic structures. They carried real traffic. People, goods, entire caravans of llamas. Thick cables, twisted from ichu grass, were strong enough to support constant movement. And these bridges weren't permanent in the modern sense. They were rebuilt regularly by local communities, maintaining a living connection between regions. It's easy to underestimate something made from grass until it's hanging over a drop that seems to go on forever. What makes all of this even more surprising is how precise everything was. These roads weren't random. They followed gradients carefully calculated so that movement stayed efficient year-round. Steep enough to climb, but not so steep that travel became exhausting. Drainage systems were built into the paths, preventing erosion from rain and melting snow. Even today, parts of these roads still hold up after centuries of exposure to earthquakes and harsh weather. That kind of durability isn't accidental. Stone blocks were shaped so precisely that even a thin blade can't fit between them. No mortar, no binding materials, just perfect alignment. These structures have survived seismic activity that destroyed later constructions built by the Spanish. That contrast alone says a lot. But the real story isn't just about moving across the land. It's about how quickly information could travel. The road system functioned like an ancient communication network. Messengers known as chasqui ran along these routes, carrying information across vast distances. They didn't run the entire journey. Instead, they worked in a relay system. One runner would sprint to the next station, pass the message, and another would continue. This system allowed messages to travel over 1,200 miles in about 10 days. That speed changes everything. While other civilizations relied on slower forms of communication, the Inca Empire could respond quickly. Decisions didn't stay local. Orders from the center could reach distant regions in days. News moved fast, and that created a kind of invisible control. Imagine planning something in secret, only for a response from the emperor to arrive almost immediately. That kind of reach changes how people think. It discourages rebellion before it even begins. The roads didn't just connect places, they connected power. And yet, something strange stands out. Despite how important this network was, it wasn't heavily defended. There weren't massive fortifications guarding every route. No constant military presence at every turn. That seems like a flaw, but it reveals something deeper. The system was built on an assumption that no one would destroy something so essential, that the value of connection outweighed the idea of sabotage. It reflects a mindset that feels very different from modern infrastructure planning. Then came the Spanish. When European explorers first encountered these roads, the reaction wasn't just curiosity, it was confusion. These structures didn't match expectations. According to their understanding, this level of engineering wasn't supposed to exist here. But it did. And not only did it exist, it worked better than many systems they were familiar with. In some cases, these roads outperformed the infrastructure Europeans had built elsewhere. That kind of realization changes perception quickly. But the story doesn't move in a straight line from discovery to appreciation. Because something else happened. Within decades of the Spanish conquest, the knowledge behind these roads began to disappear. Not gradually, not over centuries. Rapidly, techniques that had been refined over generations were lost. Master builders died without passing on their methods. The knowledge of how to shape stone with that level of precision faded. The understanding of how to create those suspension bridges from natural materials started to vanish. Within about 50 years, much of what made this system possible was gone. What remains today is impressive, but it's also incomplete. Modern researchers can measure the roads. They can analyze the materials. They can map the routes that still exist. But there's a gap between observation and understanding. The how is still missing in many areas. How were massive stones moved up steep mountain slopes without advanced tools? How were gradients calculated so accurately without modern instruments? How were bridges engineered to handle dynamic loads using only organic materials? These aren't small questions, and they don't have complete answers yet. Even more surprising is how much of the network is still hidden. Recent studies suggest that only about 30% of the entire system has been fully identified. The rest lies buried under vegetation, lost to time, or simply undiscovered. That means what's already known might just be a fraction of the full picture. And that raises a bigger idea. If a civilization could build something this advanced under those conditions, what else might have been possible? What other techniques or ideas disappeared along with the knowledge of these roads? Today, fragments of the system are still in use. In some regions, local communities continue to rely on these ancient pathways for daily travel, not as historical artifacts, but as functioning infrastructure. That says something important, because modern roads often require constant maintenance. Weather damages them, earthquakes crack them, repairs become a cycle. Yet these older paths, built with entirely different methods, have endured. There's a contrast there that's hard to ignore, and it leads to a different way of thinking about engineering. Instead of forcing the environment to adapt, the Inca approach worked with it. The landscape wasn't treated as an obstacle to overcome, but as a system to understand. Roads followed natural contours. Materials came from the surrounding area. Structures adapted to local conditions. It wasn't about domination, it was about alignment. That idea feels especially relevant now. Modern infrastructure often struggles against natural forces. Floods, landslides, and earthquakes continue to cause damage. Maintenance costs rise. Systems break down faster than expected. Meanwhile, these ancient roads remain, not everywhere, not perfectly, but enough to show that a different approach worked, and maybe still could. Because the Inca road system wasn't just a technical achievement. It was a reflection of how a civilization viewed its relationship with the world around it. That perspective might be the most valuable part of the entire story. What makes this even more unsettling is how much of it still doesn't make sense. Modern engineers can stand on these roads, measure every angle, analyze every stone, and still walk away without fully understanding how it all came together. It's one thing to admire something. It's another to admit that recreating it wouldn't be easy even today. Take the stonework, for example. Massive blocks, sometimes weighing dozens of tons, were placed with such precision that they've held together through centuries of seismic activity. No cement, no steel reinforcement, just perfectly shaped stone fitting into stone. That kind of accuracy raises a simple but uncomfortable question. How was that level of precision achieved without advanced tools? There's no clear answer. Then there's the problem of movement. Getting materials to construction sites in the Andes isn't simple even with modern equipment. The terrain is steep, unpredictable, and often inaccessible. Yet somehow, these builders transported enormous stones up mountainsides and across valleys. No cranes, no heavy machinery, not even wheeled carts. Only manpower, coordination, and techniques that didn't survive long enough to be recorded. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because it's not just about what was built, it's about what was lost. When the Spanish arrived, the system was still functioning. Roads were active, bridges were maintained, messages were moving. But within a few decades, the continuity broke. Skilled builders disappeared. Knowledge wasn't transferred. Traditions were interrupted. What had taken generations to refine vanished in a surprisingly short time. It's almost like watching a library burn, except the books were never written down to begin with. And now, all that remains are the results without the instructions. That creates a strange situation. The past feels more advanced in certain ways, but also unreachable. Not because it's too old, not as relics of the past, but as evidence of what's possible when human ingenuity aligns with the world instead of trying to overpower it. And that might be the most important part of the entire story. If something built without modern tools can outlast systems created with advanced technology, then it forces a rethink of what progress actually means. Not just faster, not just bigger, but smarter, and maybe more in tune with the world it exists in. That's the legacy left behind in the Andes. Not just a network of roads, but a blueprint for thinking differently. And it's still waiting to be understood. If this story changed the way these ancient roads are seen, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into hidden history and forgotten engineering marvels. There's always more beneath the surface and more stories waiting to be uncovered.